The knife gleamed under the flickering streetlight, hovering 3 inches from Rose's throat. "You think you're special?" the woman hissed in broken English, her Korean flowing more naturally as she switched languages mid-sentence. "Dancing here like you own the place. This is our territory." Rose didn't flinch. Her dark eyes, lined with gold that caught the Seoul city lights, narrowed as she assessed the 3 women blocking her path in the alley behind Hongdae's main street. She'd just finished her evening performance, the one that drew crowds so thick that local vendors complained they couldn't see their own storefronts. The one that had earned her 340,000 won in tips tonight alone. All crumpled bills and coins that now weighed down her backpack. "Your territory?" Rose's voice carried that distinct blend of American directness and something softer. Something that came from growing up in Atlanta before Seoul became her unlikely home. She tilted her head, and her box braids, decorated with golden cuffs that matched her eyeshadow, swayed with the movement. "Funny, because I've been dancing here for 2 years, and this is the first time you've had the spine to approach me." The knife-wielding woman's face flushed. Behind her, her 2 friends shifted uncomfortably. "Last warning," the woman spat. "Find somewhere else or—" Rose moved. One swift motion. She grabbed the woman's wrist, twisted it with the precision of someone who'd taken self-defense classes in 3 different countries, and had the knife clattering to the ground before any of them could blink. Then she stepped back, hands raised, that brilliant smile spreading across her face like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. "Or what, sweetie?" Rose's laugh was rich and unbothered. "Look, I don't know who sent you, but here's what's going to happen. I'm going to keep dancing on my corner, making my money, and living my life, and you're going to walk away and tell whoever put you up to this that Rose Akinyi doesn't scare easy. We clear." The 3 women stood frozen, pride warring with common sense. Finally, the leader snatched up her knife and jerked her head toward the street. They left without another word, but their resentment hung in the air like smoke. Rose exhaled slowly, letting her heartbeat return to normal. Then she slung her backpack over her shoulder and headed toward the convenience store on the corner, the one where she always bought her post-performance ramen and banana milk. She didn't notice the man in the black suit watching from across the street, or the way his jaw had clenched when that knife appeared, or how his hand had moved instinctively toward the gun hidden beneath his jacket. She didn't see him signal to the shadows, where 3 more men materialized and quietly followed the women who'd threatened her. All Rose knew was that her feet hurt, her muscles ached in that good way that meant she'd given the performance everything, and tomorrow she'd be back on that corner doing it all again. Because this was her life now. Seoul, South Korea, a city that had embraced her when Atlanta felt too small, when the streets back home held too many memories of her mother's disappointed face and her father's absent one. Here she was free. Here she was herself. And no one was going to take that from her. The man in the black suit was named Kong Dae-won, though most people who knew what he really did for a living just called him Boss Kong, or, if they were very unlucky, nothing at all because they didn't live long enough to learn his name. At 32, Dae-won had built an empire that stretched through Seoul's underbelly like roots through concrete, drug distribution, protection rackets, underground gambling, and the kind of information brokering that made politicians and CEOs nervous. He was the 3rd son of the Kong family, the one no one expected to amount to anything, until his ruthlessness and strategic mind made him indispensable. He didn't do feelings, didn't do romance, didn't do anything that couldn't be bought, sold, or eliminated. Until 6 months ago, when he'd been driving through Hongdae after a particularly bloody meeting, and his car had stopped at a red light, and he'd heard the music. Hip-hop, but not the kind that blasted from club speakers. This was raw, mixed with Afrobeats and something else he couldn't identify. And then he'd seen her, this woman, this presence, moving in the center of a crowd like she'd been born from the rhythm itself. Her skin was deep brown, gleaming with sweat under the street lights, and she moved with a confidence that made everyone around her look like shadows. She'd been wearing ripped jeans and a crop top that showed her midriff, and when she rolled her waist in a movement that seemed physically impossible, the crowd had erupted. Dae-won, who'd ordered executions over dinner and negotiated million-dollar deals without blinking, had forgotten to breathe. For 6 months, he'd found excuses to drive through Hongdae, then to walk through Hongdae, then to stand in the crowd watching her perform. His men thought he'd lost his mind. His second-in-command, Park Jin-ho, had actually asked if he needed to see a doctor. "Boss, you've been to the same street corner every night for a week," Jin-ho had said carefully, as if addressing a wild animal. "Is there a problem we need to handle?" Dae-won had just shaken his head, unable to explain that the problem was his complete inability to approach this woman like a normal human being. He knew how to order someone's death. He didn't know how to ask for a phone number. He could negotiate with cartel leaders and Yakuza bosses. He couldn't figure out how to start a conversation with a street dancer who smiled like the sun. So he did what he always did when faced with an impossible situation. He studied. He researched. He watched YouTube videos on how to talk to women at 3 a.m. in his penthouse, feeling more ridiculous than he'd ever felt in his life. He bought books on body language and communication. He even, in a moment of desperation, asked Jin-ho for advice. Jin-ho had laughed so hard he'd nearly choked on his soju. "You? The man who once stared down a rival gang leader for 20 minutes without blinking until the guy literally pissed himself? You can't talk to a woman? This is different," Dae-won had muttered. "How? She's not afraid of me. And that was the heart of it, wasn't it?" Rose looked at the world like it owed her nothing and she owed it nothing back. She danced because she loved it, lived because she chose to, and moved through Seoul like a queen in her kingdom. She didn't know who he was, didn't care about his reputation, wouldn't be impressed by his money or his power. She was free in a way he'd never been, and he wanted that freedom, wanted to be near it, wanted to understand it. So tonight, after watching those women threaten her and seeing her handle it with the kind of savage grace that made his chest tight, Dae-won made a decision. He was going to learn how to dance. Not in his usual way, not by throwing money at the problem or having his men handle it. No, if he was going to get Rose's attention, he was going to do it properly. He was going to earn it. The man who'd never worked for anything in his personal life, who'd built his empire on fear and violence and cold calculation, was going to learn how to move his body to music. Jin-ho, when told of this plan the next morning, had stared at his boss for a full minute. "You're serious? Completely. You realize you have the rhythm of a malfunctioning robot, right?" Dae-won's expression didn't change. "Then I'll learn. Boss, we're in the middle of negotiations with the Chinese. Hire the best dance instructor in Seoul. Private sessions. Tomorrow." Jin-ho opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "This woman must be something else." "She is," Dae-won said simply. "And I'm going to prove to her that I can be something else too." What he didn't say, couldn't say because he'd never been good with words, was that Rose had woken something in him that he'd thought died years ago, buried under bodies and blood money and the weight of the Kong family name. She'd reminded him that there was more to life than power. And for the first time in 15 years, Kong Dae-won wanted something he couldn't simply take. He wanted to be worthy of her smile. The dance studio smelled like sweat, rubber flooring, and the kind of determination that comes from doing the same movement 500 times until your body remembers it in your sleep. Dae-won stood in the center of the mirrored room, wearing black joggers and a plain white t-shirt, civilian clothes that felt foreign on a man who practically lived in tailored suits. His instructor, a woman named Kim So-rae who'd won 3 national hip-hop championships and had absolutely no idea who her client really was, looked at him with the expression of someone who'd just been asked to teach calculus to a goldfish. "Okay," So-rae said slowly, tying her hair into a ponytail. "Let's start with the absolute basics. Can you clap on beat?" Dae-won's jaw tightened. "I'm not completely rhythmless." "Prove it." She played a simple beat, and Dae-won clapped along, perfectly on time. So-rae's eyebrows rose. "Okay, that's something. Now move your hips while you do it." That's where things fell apart. Dae-won, who could field strip a gun in 30 seconds and had once fought off 4 attackers with just a broken bottle, could not for the life of him coordinate his hips and his hands at the same time. "No, no, no." So-rae stopped the music, pinching the bridge of her nose. "You're moving like you're trying to intimidate the rhythm into submission. Dance isn't about control, it's about flow. It's about letting the music move through you, not forcing yourself to move to it." "I don't do flow," Dae-won muttered. "Then you're not going to impress whoever this woman is." His head snapped up. "How did you? Please." You're paying me 3 times my normal rate for private sessions at 6 a.m. before the studio officially opens, and you have the desperate energy of a man trying to win someone over. Also, you asked me specifically if I could teach you Afrobeats fusion, which isn't exactly common around here. Soare crossed her arms, smirking. So who is she? Day one considered lying, then decided. Against it, Soare would find out eventually. There's a street dancer in Hongdae. Rose. Rose? The black woman who dances by the Hello Kitty Cafe. You know her. Everyone knows her. She's incredible. Soare's expression shifted to something like respect. Also completely out of your league. I'm aware. Good. At least you're not delusional. Soare grabbed a water bottle and took a long sip. Okay, here's the deal. Rose dances like she's having a conversation with the music. She listens, she responds, she feels. If you want to dance with her, you need to learn how to hear what the music is saying. And right now, you dance like you're declaring war on the beat. Day one absorbed this, nodding slowly. Teach me. For the next 6 weeks, Day one's life became a strange double existence. By day, he was still Boss Kong. Meeting with suppliers, handling territorial disputes, ensuring the various illegal operations under his control ran smoothly. By night and early morning, he was in that dance studio, learning to move his body in ways that felt completely unnatural. Soare was a merciless instructor. She made him practice basic hip rolls for 3 days straight. She forced him to watch hours of footage of African and Caribbean dance styles, teaching him about the history and culture behind the movements. She made him understand that dance wasn't just technique. It was story, emotion, identity. You move like you're afraid someone's watching, she told him one morning, 3 weeks in. Like you're worried about looking stupid. I am worried about looking stupid. Why? You think Rose never looked stupid when she was learning? Everyone looks stupid when they're starting something new. The difference is whether you let that fear stop you or push through it. Something about those words struck Day one harder than expected. His entire life had been about never showing weakness, never appearing vulnerable. The Kong family didn't do uncertainty, but here he was, willingly making himself look foolish in pursuit of something that mattered more than his pride. Maybe that's what Soare meant by flow. Maybe it meant letting go of control. That night, Day one went to Hongdae and did something he'd never done before. He joined the crowd, close enough that Rose could see him, and when she started dancing, he moved too. Not in her circle, not trying to challenge or upstage her, just dancing in the crowd, letting the music guide him, using everything Soare had taught him. He was clumsy. He definitely didn't look smooth, but he was trying, genuinely trying, and something about that must have registered because halfway through her performance, Rose's eyes landed on him and stayed there for a full 8 seconds. Then she smiled. Not her performance smile, but something smaller, more curious, and incorporated a move into her routine that he recognized from the YouTube videos he'd been watching. Agwara gwara, bouncing and shifting weight from leg to leg. She was testing him. Day one, heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with physical exertion. Did the move back. Badly, sure, but recognizably. Rose's smile widened into a grin. For the rest of her performance, they engaged in this strange call and response. She'd do a move, he'd attempt to copy it. Sometimes he succeeded, sometimes he failed spectacularly, and every time he messed up, Rose would laugh. Not mockingly, but with genuine amusement that made her whole face light up. When her set ended and the crowd dispersed, Rose walked straight up to him, and Day one realized he'd made a critical error in his planning. He'd learned to dance, but he still had no idea how to actually talk to her. So, Rose said, tilting her head in that way she did, gold beads in her braids catching the light. You've been in my crowd for months, lurking in the back. Now suddenly you're dancing? What changed? Day one's mouth went dry. Up close, she was even more stunning. Her skin had this glow to it, and her eyes held intelligence and humor in equal measure. She smelled like cocoa butter and something floral. He paused, then decided honesty was his only option. I wanted to understand what you see when you dance. I wanted to know what makes you move like that. Rose blinked, clearly not expecting that answer. That's actually kind of deep for a random dude in a crowd. I'm not good at this, Day One admitted. At talking to people. Any of this. But I've been watching you for 6 months. And I can't stop thinking about how free you look when you dance. Like nothing in the world can touch you. And I wanted to know what that feels like. There was a long pause. Rose studied him with those sharp eyes, and Day One had the unsettling sensation of being truly seen for the first time in years. Not as Boss Kong, not as a weapon, but as just himself. 6 months is a long time to work up the courage to say hi, Rose finally said. Like I said, I'm not good at this. Clearly. But she was smiling again. What's your name, stalker? Day One. Kong Day One. Rose Akinyi. But I guess you knew that already. She shifted her weight, and Day One noticed she was wearing different sneakers than last week. White Air Force Ones with hand-painted flowers on the sides. You know what, Day One? You're weird, and you dance like a baby giraffe learning to walk. But at least you're honest. That's rare around here. Is that good? It's interesting. Rose checked her phone, then looked back at him. I'm about to go get food. You hungry? Day One, who'd eaten dinner 3 hours ago, nodded immediately. Starving. Cool. You're buying, since you've been freeloading off my performances for half a year. There's a place 2 blocks over that does amazing kimchi jjigae. You like spicy food? Love it. We'll see. Rose started walking, and Day One followed, feeling like he'd just won some kind of battle he didn't fully understand. So tell me, Day One, what do you do when you're not attempting to dance in public? Day One's mind raced. He couldn't exactly say organized crime. I manage business interests. For my family. Sounds boring. It is. That at least was true. Well, lucky for you, I'm the opposite of boring. Rose glanced at him sidelong, and there was mischief in her expression. Fair warning though, I don't do subtle, I don't do games, and I don't do men who waste my time. You seem cool and all. But if this is just some weird fetish thing or you're looking for an exotic experience, you can peace out right now. It's not that, Day One said firmly. I've never met anyone like you. The way you move, the way you own every space you're in, you're extraordinary. And I want to know you if you'll let me. Rose stopped walking. They were under a street light outside a closed flower shop, and soul hummed around them. Traffic and voices and music from a dozen different bars. She turned to face him fully, and Day One held his breath. Okay, she said finally. Okay, Kong Day One. Let's see if you can keep up. 3 months later, Day One stood in his penthouse apartment, watching Rose teach his most feared enforcer how to Dougie. No, Jinho, you're too stiff. Loosen your shoulders. Rose demonstrated. Her movements fluid and easy despite the formal dress she'd worn to dinner with Day One's family earlier. She'd kicked off her heels an hour ago and was now barefoot on his marble floor, absolutely destroying his second-in-command's dignity. Jinho, who'd once broken a man's arm for looking at him wrong, was gamely trying to follow along, though he looked like he was having some kind of medical emergency. I feel ridiculous, Jinho muttered. You look ridiculous. Day One contributed from the couch, and Rose pointed at him without breaking rhythm. Don't be mean. He's doing great for someone who has the natural rhythm of a washing machine on spin cycle. She high-fived Jinho, who actually smiled, something Day One had seen maybe twice in 5 years. Besides, you weren't exactly smooth when we started either, babe. Babe still made Day One's chest warm in a way he found both uncomfortable and addictive. 3 months of dating Rose had fundamentally rewired something in his brain. She'd crashed into his carefully controlled life like a hurricane and somehow made everything better and more chaotic simultaneously. She knew about his business now. He'd told her after 6 weeks, unable to keep lying and terrified she'd run. Instead, she'd sat quietly in her tiny studio apartment, which he'd offered to replace with something bigger at least 50 times, and she'd refused every time. Processed the information, and then said, okay, so you're basically a K-drama villain. That's wild. Are you going to hurt me? Never. Are you going to lie to me? I'll try not to. Are you going to respect that I'm my own person and not some prize you won? Always. Then we're good. But I'm not getting involved in your business, and if you ever ask me to, we're done. Clear? Crystal. That had been it. No drama, no judgment. Just boundaries clearly stated and respected. It was so refreshingly different from everything else in his life that day one had fallen even harder. The dinner tonight with his family had been complicated. His father, Kang Junho, had been predictably racist in that passive-aggressive way that never said anything explicitly wrong but made the subtext crystal clear. His mother had been overly polite to the point of condescension. His older brothers had been dismissive. Rose had handled all of it with the same grace and savage humor she brought to everything else. When his father made a comment about understanding Korean culture, Rose had smiled sweetly and replied in perfect Korean, which she'd been learning for 2 years and had never mentioned to any of them. "Sir, with all due respect, I understand your culture fine. I'm just not interested in pretending to be less than I am to make you comfortable." His mother had nearly choked on her wine. His father's face had gone purple. And day one had fallen in love with her right there at the dinner table, so completely and utterly that he'd forgotten to breathe. Later, in the car, Rose had been quiet until she'd suddenly laughed. "Your family is absolutely terrible. I kind of love them." "You? What?" "They're terrible in that really entertaining way. Like, your dad thinks he's being subtle with his racism, but he's about as subtle as a brick through a window. And your mom keeps touching my hair without asking like I'm a pet poodle. It's wild." She'd looked at him, her expression softening. But they stayed for the whole dinner. They ate the food, they asked questions, invasive, problematic questions, but questions. They're trying, in their own deeply dysfunctional way. "That's something. You're remarkable," Day One had said. "I know," Rose had grinned. "But it's nice that you noticed." Now, watching her in his apartment, teaching his men to dance and raiding his fridge like she owned the place, Day One marveled at how thoroughly she'd infiltrated every aspect of his life. His men adored her. She'd won them over by remembering their names, asking about their families, and absolutely destroying them in video games. His business partners were terrified of her because she'd once sat in on a negotiation and casually pointed out 3 legal loopholes they'd missed. Even his family was slowly, grudgingly warming to her, though his mother still couldn't resist making passive-aggressive comments about grandchildren. "Okay, I'm done torturing Jean Ho for tonight," Rose announced, flopping onto the couch next to Day One. He can return to his natural state of being intimidating. Jean Ho, straightening his shirt, managed to look dignified despite the fact that he'd just been dancing to Megan Thee Stallion. "Miss Rose, as always, it's been educational. Call me Rose, we've been over this. The miss makes me feel like a teacher, which is way too much responsibility." After Jean Ho left, the apartment fell into comfortable silence. Rose curled up against Day One's side, and he wrapped an arm around her, still somewhat amazed that she let him do this, that she chose him every day, despite everything. "Your family hates me," Rose said quietly. "They don't. Day One." She looked up at him. "Don't do that. Don't lie to make me feel better. They hate me, or at least they hate what I represent. A black woman dating their son, refusing to bow and scrape and play by their rules. Your dad literally asked me if I was looking for a visa." Day One's jaw clenched. "I'm sorry. Don't apologize for them. You're not responsible for their ignorance." Rose sighed, tracing patterns on his chest with her finger. "I just need to know, are we doing this for real? Because I can handle your family's racism. I've dealt with worse, and I'll deal with worse in the future. But I need to know you're all in, because if this is just a phase or a rebellion against your family, tell me now." "Rose." Day One caught her hand, pressing it flat against his heart. "I've spent my entire life being what my family needed me to be. Ruthless when they needed ruthless. Strategic when they needed strategic. Violent when they needed violent. I built an empire on their expectations, and I never questioned it because that's what Kangs do. We sacrifice ourselves for the family name." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Then I met you, and for the first time in my life, I wanted something for myself. Not for the family, not for power, not for reputation, just for me. You make me remember what it feels like to be human instead of just a weapon. You make me laugh, you call me out on my bullshit, you challenge me to be better. I am terrified of losing you every single day." Rose's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "That's really intense, babe. I know. I'm working on being less intense." Soare says I approach romance like a military operation. That surprised a laugh out of her. You're still taking lessons from Soare? Every week. I want to keep up with you. Day 1. You know you don't have to be an amazing dancer for me to love you, right? The apartment went very quiet. It was the first time either of them had used that word. Love. It hung in the air between them, enormous and terrifying and perfect. You love me. Day 1's voice came out rougher than intended. Rose sat up, turning to face him fully. Her expression was vulnerable in a way he'd rarely seen. She, who faced the world with such fearless confidence, looked uncertain. Yeah, I do. I love you, Kong Day 1. Even though you're a criminal and your rhythm is still questionable and you eat your ramen in the weirdest way possible. I love that you're trying so hard to be better. I love that you let me be exactly who I am. I love how you watch me dance like I'm performing miracles. I love that underneath all the scary Mafia stuff, you're just a guy who wants to be worthy of the people you care about. Day 1 pulled her into his lap, cradling her face in his hands. I love you too. I've loved you since that first night, even though I didn't have words for it. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I don't deserve you, but I'm selfish enough to keep trying anyway. They kissed, and it was soft and sweet and perfect, until Rose pulled back with a wicked grin. So now that we've had our dramatic love confession moment, can we acknowledge that your mom definitely hired a private investigator to dig into my background? Day 1 blinked. How did you? Please. A random delivery man showed up at my studio apartment last week asking weird questions about my family and my visa status? Amateur hour. Rose laughed at his expression. Don't worry. I gave him my cousin's number back in Atlanta. She's a lawyer and she loves messing with people who try to intimidate her family. Your mom's investigator is probably still recovering from that phone call. You're incredible. I know. Now, are we going to watch the drama you pretend not to be obsessed with? Or are we going to actually discuss the very serious issue of your family's continued boundary violations? Can't we do both? This is why I love you. Rose grabbed the remote, settling back against his chest. You're learning to multitask. As the opening credits played, Day 1 pressed a kiss to the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair products. Tomorrow, he'd have to deal with a shipment dispute and a territorial challenge from a rival gang. Next week, he'd probably have to have another uncomfortable conversation with his father about respecting Rose's autonomy. But right now, in this moment, he was just a man watching television with the woman he loved. A woman who danced like freedom and laughed like music and somehow saw past all his darkness to something worth saving. 6 months ago, if someone had told him he'd learn to dance, fall in love with a street performer, and find happiness in such a simple moment, he would have had them killed for wasting his time. Now, he couldn't imagine his life any other way. Hey, Day 1. Rose said suddenly, not looking away from the screen. Yeah. Next week, I'm performing at this underground competition. Real deal stuff, not just street performing. I want you there. I'll be there. Even if your family has some kind of important business thing, especially if my family has some kind of important business thing. You're my priority now. They're just going to have to accept that. Rose turned, her smile bright enough to outshine the television. Look at you, being all romantic and choosing love over duty. Growth. You're mocking me. Always. But I love you anyway. And in his cold, sterile penthouse apartment, surrounded by the trappings of illegal wealth and violent power, Kong Day 1 smiled. Really smiled, the kind of smile that transformed his entire face, and thought that maybe, just maybe, he'd finally found something worth being good for. Something worth dancing for. Someone worth everything. 2 years after Rosa Kinyi walked into Kong Day 1's life and dismantled every wall he'd spent 15 years building. Soul threw them a party they never asked for. It started the way most things in their relationship started, with Rose doing something completely unexpected. She'd been offered a collaboration with one of Korea's biggest entertainment companies, SM Entertainment's new urban dance division, which wanted to feature her in a campaign celebrating African dance culture's influence on Korean street dance. The deal was substantial, more money than she'd ever seen in one check, a platform that would take her from Hongdae streets to international stages. She turned it down. Not because she wasn't interested, not because the money wasn't good, but because the contract had a clause requiring her to soften her public image. to be less bold, less vocal, less Rose. The executive presenting the offer had actually used the phrase, more palatable to mainstream Korean audiences. Rose had slid the contract back across the table, capped her pen, and said in perfect Korean, "I've spent my whole life being exactly who I am. I'm not going to start editing myself now for anyone's comfort. Good luck finding someone else." When she told Day One that evening, he'd stared at her for a long moment, then pulled out his phone. "What are you doing?" she'd asked. "Making a call." "Day One. I'm not interfering," he'd said firmly, catching her warning look. "I'm investing. There's a difference. I've been looking for a legitimate business venture for 2 years now, and it just walked through my door wearing coconut oil and refusing to compromise." Rose had gone very still. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you don't need SM Entertainment. You need your own label, your own platform, something that belongs entirely to you, where nobody can put a single clause in your contract telling you to be less than yourself." He'd set his phone down, turning to face her fully. "Let me build it. With you. Not for you, with you. Your vision, your creative control, your name on the door. I'll handle the business side, the legal structure, the funding. You handle the art." The silence that followed was the longest of their relationship. "You'd do that," Rose had finally said, her voice smaller than he'd ever heard it. "Rose, I dismantled 3 illegal distribution networks and redirected the capital into legitimate businesses over the last 18 months, because you looked at me one night and asked if I ever wanted to be proud of how I made my money." Day One crossed the room and took her hands. "Everything I'm building now, every legitimate step I take, is because you made me believe I could be more than what I was raised to be. The least I can do is make sure the whole world gets to see what you can be." Rose cried. Full, ugly, shoulder-shaking tears that she'd have been embarrassed about if it were anyone else watching. Day One held her through all of it, one hand on her back, not saying a word, just being steady and present the way he'd learned to be. "You can't just say things like that," she managed eventually, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "I meant every word. I know. That's why I'm crying. You emotionally devastating man." The label launched 8 months later. They called it Rhythm Free, Rose's idea. 3 in the morning over instant ramen and banana milk. Scribbled on a napkin that Day One had laminated and framed in the office because he was absolutely that sentimental now and had fully accepted it. The launch event was held on the same Hongdae Street corner where Rose had been dancing for years. Not in a fancy venue, not in some corporate conference room. Right there on the pavement, under the same flickering streetlights that had lit her performances for 2 years. The crowd was enormous. Word had spread through Seoul's underground dance community like wildfire. Rose was performing, and it was going to be something special. People came from every district, artists and street dancers and curious onlookers packing the block 3 people deep. Jin-ho, standing to the side in his usual black suit with his arms crossed, surveyed the crowd with the expression of a man who'd seen everything and was still somehow surprised. "Boss," he said quietly, "there are entertainment reporters here, bloggers. I count 3 different camera crews. Day One in dark jeans and a simple black jacket. Civilian clothes that fit him naturally now, after 2 years of Rose's gentle insistence that he didn't always have to look like he was attending his own assassination." Nodded. "Good. The Kong family name is going to be in those reports. Also good." Jin-ho was quiet for a moment. "Your father called this morning. He wanted to know why you were spending family capital on a dance company." "What did you tell him?" "That it wasn't family capital. That it was yours." Jin-ho paused. "He also said to tell Rose that her Korean is better than his youngest son's." Day One laughed. That full, real laugh that Rose had excavated from somewhere deep in his chest over 2 years of patience and persistence. "That's the closest he'll ever come to a compliment. She'll appreciate it anyway. She appreciates everything. That's one of the things I love most about her." The music started then, a sound system that Rose had personally curated, opening with a blend of Nigerian Afrobeats that shifted seamlessly into Korean hip-hop and then into something that was entirely its own thing, entirely new, the product of a black woman from Atlanta who'd carried her culture to Seoul and let it have a conversation with the culture she'd found there. Rose emerged from the crowd rather than from a stage. She appeared behind a cluster of spectators, already moving, already fluid, wearing an outfit that managed to be simultaneously traditional Korean in its fabric and color and entirely, unmistakably her own gold accessories, box braids, piled high with ornaments that caught the light, and paint on her cheekbones that glowed under the streetlights. The crowd parted around her like water around a stone. She danced through them, not at them. Each person she passed became briefly part of the performance. A hand extended, a shared moment of rhythm, an invitation rather than a display. Children instinctively reached for her hands. Old women found themselves swaying. Even the stone-faced security personnel Jinho had stationed around the perimeter were nodding to the beat. Daewon watched from the edge of the circle, and his chest was so full of feeling that he had no idea what to do with himself. Then Rose found him with her eyes across the crowd. The way she always found him, like some internal compass that only pointed one direction. And she grinned and extended her hand toward him. The crowd turned to see who she was looking at. Daewon walked forward, and for a moment the old instinct rose up. The fear of looking foolish, the discomfort of vulnerability, the ingrained belief that showing emotion was weakness. He felt it like an old scar, familiar but no longer painful. He took her hand, and they danced together in the middle of Hongdae Street, under Seoul's night sky, while hundreds of people watched and cheered and cameras captured something that would end up going viral by the next morning under the caption, "The CEO and the Dancer." Seoul's most unexpected love story. He still wasn't as good as her. He'd never be as good as her. But he moved with confidence now, with joy, with the freedom she'd spent 2 years teaching him to feel. He could read her body language mid-dance, could anticipate when she was about to change rhythm, could match her energy even when he couldn't match her technique. Soare, who'd somehow ended up as Rhythm Free's head choreographer, and who claimed it was purely a professional decision that had nothing to do with watching her most unlikely student fall in love, stood in the crowd with her arms crossed and a satisfied expression on her face. "I made that happen," she told the woman standing next to her. "You taught him to clap on beat," Jinho replied. "Rose made the rest happen." Details. Later, much later, when the crowds had gone and the street was quiet, and the rhythm-free team was celebrating in a restaurant nearby with enough food to feed a small army, Daewon and Rose sat on the pavement of their street corner. Just the two of them. Like they often ended up, all the noise and chaos and people eventually falling away until it was just them. Two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely way and decided to keep choosing each other every single day. Rose had her head on his shoulder and her shoes off, and she was drawing patterns on the back of his hand with her finger. "Are you happy?" she asked quietly. It was the question she asked sometimes, not because she doubted him, but because she understood that happiness wasn't his natural state, that he had to be reminded to check in with himself. Daewon considered the question honestly, the way she taught him to. Not the reflexive yes of a man trained to project strength, but a genuine assessment. He had a legitimate business he was building with the woman he loved. He had friends, real ones, not just men who feared him. Jinho had become his brother in every way that mattered. Soare called him out on his nonsense with cheerful regularity. Rose's friends from the dance community had adopted him into their circle and taught him more about genuine human connection than his entire previous life had managed. His relationship with his family was imperfect but improving. His father had actually shown up to tonight's launch event, standing at the back of the crowd without announcing himself, and had left before anyone could approach him. But he'd come. That was something. His mother texted Rose Korean recipes now, which was her love language, and Rose made them. And sent photos back, which was hers. The empire he'd inherited was being slowly, carefully, methodically transformed. It would take years. Some parts might be impossible. But he was trying, in the same way he tried to learn to dance, imperfectly, persistently, with Rose as his compass. "Yes," Daewon said. "I'm genuinely, completely happy." Rose lifted her head to look at him, checking his face the way she always did, reading the truth behind his words. Whatever she found there made her smile soften into something private and precious. "Good," she said simply. "Are you?" he asked. She leaned up and kissed his cheek, then settled back against his shoulder, looking out at the empty street that had been their beginning. "I came to Seoul running away from a life that felt too small," Rose said thoughtfully. "I thought what I needed was freedom. Just me and my dancing and nobody making demands on who I had to be. And I found that. I found it right here on this corner. She paused. But then I found something better than freedom. I found someone who made me feel free and loved at the same time. Which, for the record, I didn't think was possible. Neither did I. We're both idiots. Extraordinarily so. She laughed, and it was the same laugh that had first reached him through a car window 2.5 years ago. Rich, unrestrained, completely authentic. It still did the same thing to him. Probably always would. Day one. Yeah. I want to dance at our wedding. The word wedding landed in the quiet street like a stone in still water, sending ripples in every direction. Day one went very still. Our wedding, he repeated carefully. I'm not proposing, Rose clarified quickly. I'm just saying when it happens, and I think it's going to happen, I feel that in my bones. I want to dance at it. A real dance. Not a first dance slow shuffle. A full performance. And I want you to dance with me. I'll need more lessons. Obviously. She tilted her face up toward the Seoul sky, watching a plane cross between the buildings. I also want it to be outside. In Korea? And in Atlanta. I'm thinking 2 ceremonies. One for each world. Day one was quiet for a long moment, his hand finding hers in the dark, fingers interlacing. My family will have opinions. Your family always has opinions. That's what makes them entertaining. My father will insist on a traditional Korean ceremony. He can insist away, as long as he also shows up to the Atlanta ceremony and dances with my Auntie Patricia, who is going to absolutely terrorize him in the best possible way. Day one thought about his stoic, imperious father being terrorized by Rose's Auntie Patricia, and felt a laugh building in his chest. You've planned all of this. I think about it sometimes, when I'm happy, which is most of the time now. Rose squeezed his hand. You did that, you know. You made me the kind of happy that makes you plan things. I used to only live day to day. Now I think about the future and I'm not scared of it. I used to think about the future and only see business strategy, Day one admitted. Now I see you in it. Every version of it. Rose sat up, turning to face him on the pavement, crossing her legs and taking both his hands in hers. Her eyes were bright and dark and full of everything she was. Bold and funny and kind and fierce and completely, utterly herself. Ask me, she said softly. Day one blinked. What? You've been carrying something in your jacket pocket for 3 weeks. Jin-ho told me. Before you have him fired for it. He told me because he loves you and he can't stand watching you work up the nerve. Rose's smile was gentle and knowing and wonderful. So ask me, Day one. I didn't come all the way to Seoul and fall in love with a reformed mafia boss just to wait forever. His heart was doing something completely undignified in his chest. He reached into his jacket pocket and found the ring that had been living there for 23 days. While he looked for the perfect moment, rehearsed the perfect words, planned the perfect setting. There was no perfect setting. There was just this street corner, this woman, this moment. Rose Akinyi, Day one said, and his voice was steady in the way that meant he was feeling everything at once. You walked into my life and made me realize I'd been surviving instead of living. You taught me to dance, to laugh, to choose vulnerability over armor. You made me want to be good, not powerful, not feared, but genuinely actually good. I don't have perfect words for this because you've made me understand that perfect is less important than true. And the truest thing I know is that I want to spend the rest of my life standing beside you, dancing beside you, building something with you that we're both proud of. He opened the box. The ring was not the largest or most expensive ring in the world. He'd chosen it because the stone, a deep, warm amber, reminded him of the color of the street lights the first night he'd seen her dance, and the setting was Ethiopian gold, sourced through a jeweler Rose had mentioned once in passing, which meant he'd actually been planning this for much longer than 3 weeks. Rose pressed both hands over her mouth. Will you marry me? Day one asked simply, when all the words were gone. The street was silent around them. Seoul hummed in the distance. Somewhere nearby, music played from a bar that hadn't closed yet, drifting through the night air like a soundtrack that hadn't been planned but fit perfectly anyway. Rose lowered her hands from her face. Her cheeks were wet. She was smiling so hard it looked like it might hurt. Yes, she said. Obviously, completely, yes. He put the ring on her finger and she kissed him, and then she stood up and pulled him to his feet, And right there on the empty street at 2 in the morning with no crowd and no music except whatever was drifting from that distant bar, Rosa Kinney danced. And Kong Day One danced. With her. Imperfectly. Joyfully. Freely. The way he planned to do for the rest of his life. In the morning, someone who'd been walking home late posted a video of them online. 2 figures dancing alone on an empty Seoul street. The woman moving like music made visible. The man following her lead with clumsy, devoted joy. The caption read, "Saw this couple dancing by themselves at 2 a.m. in Hongdae. Don't know who they are, but I want what they have." It got 4 million views by sunset. Rose sent it to Day One with a single message. Baby giraffe energy forever. He saved it as his phone wallpaper.
Hello besties, in this story we learned that true strength isn't about control or power, it's about having the courage to be vulnerable for the right person. When you meet someone who sees your authentic self, love them by becoming the best version of who you are, not by changing who they are. The greatest transformation happens when you are brave enough to let go of who you've always been and dance to a new rhythm. Thank you so much for watching. Kindly like, subscribe and share.